All right.
Steve, do you have some light to put on your face?
If I could just do a quick sound check. It does sound like
Hey, testing. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
And Susanna, how's the feedback?
Actually, it sounds good.
Okay, I'm hearing my voice.
I hear a
There's
lot
a little
of
echo, but it's not bad.
Try it again because I heard a lot of feedback. Yeah, I can't talk like that.
Okay, how about a quick sound check? Okay, I'm not getting the feedback I was.
Okay, how about me? Nope, no feedback.
All right, well, welcome everyone. It is 7:04 in the evening. We are doing our Brentwood Town Hall. I appreciate, see a lot of folks logging in right now, and appreciate everybody taking the time in the evening to be with us. My name is Brian Oftedal. I'm the president of East Contra Costa Fire Protection District, which is your fire protection district if you live out in Brentwood, Oakley, Discovery Bay, Knightson, Byron, Marsh Creek, Morgan Territory, and Bethel Island. So thank you all for being here. As I said, this is a Brentwood Town Hall, but if you're not from Brentwood, thank you for joining us. There's no problem for you to be joining us this evening or sharing it with folks that don't live in the area. But really trying to, if we can, bounce around our district, since we do have 250 square miles and it's such a diverse area. We're trying to hone in on some of the local towns and cities within our area. This evening, I'm going to go ahead and introduce several special guests. I'd like to start out with our elects. This evening, I've got Vice Mayor Joel Bryant with the City of Brentwood with us. Able to do a sound check with you, Mr. Vice Mayor?
Are you reading me?
Very nice. Thank you. We also have Brentwood City Manager Tim Ogden with us. Tim, am I able to do a sound check with you?
Good evening.
Nice. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate you being here. Tim is basically going to be here for answering questions, and Vice Mayor Joel Bryant is going to be answering questions as well. However, I'm going to give him a little bit of a talking point here in a moment. I'd like to do a couple of other quick introductions. We've got our hardworking fire chief, Brian Helmick, on the line. Thank you for being here, Chief. And we have Fire Marshal Steve Aubert that's with us. Thank you also, Steve. Right prior to doing questions and answers, there's going to be a presentation. Once we move to questions and answers, you can, there's features in here that you can either raise your hand or you can physically raise your hand, and we'll try to capture that and get you on. If you're not comfortable speaking out loud, or you just prefer to type something in, please feel free to type into the chat column. I'm gonna do just a little bit of housekeeping. I know on my computer right now, I'm using an iPad, and in the upper right-hand corner of mine, there's 3 little dots. And if I click on that, it gives me a chat feature that's in there. It also gives me a raise hand feature. On other platforms, there's lower part of your screen on a desktop. And as I said, you can physically raise your hands. If you are dialing in on a phone, it's *9 to mute yourself. I'm sorry, unmute yourself. We will have everybody muted this evening except for panelists, but I would ask actually panelists if you could please mute yourself, as it will help eliminate some of that background noise. I'd like to start out with Vice Mayor Joel Bryant. If you wouldn't mind taking a couple of minutes, I definitely appreciate you being here this morning, this evening. My time is all over the place. Appreciate you being here this evening with us. And I I know I've had the opportunity over the years to starting out working with you on the fire board when it was an appointed fire board prior to going to an elected board, and had an opportunity to fill your seat as the president's role. But you're obviously very involved in the community. I don't think there's a community event that I've gone to yet that you haven't been at. But definitely appreciate you being here this evening. And if you wouldn't mind just taking a couple of minutes just to say a few words.
Thank you, President Oftedal. I'm really thankful to be able to be here. I just wanted to address a couple of things that were questions that I've been receiving pretty regularly about our fire protection and what the city's doing about it. And so, as I'm sure most of those that are on this call are aware, we have a fire ad hoc committee that is comprised of Councilperson Karen Rary and myself, in addition to our city manager, as well as fire board members and our fire chief. And the job of this subcommittee is to work in tandem with the chief. I have always felt that the experts in an area should be the ones that give the most direction and input, because no matter how great of an idea that I might think I have, or I've heard others have, and they seem to make a lot of sense as far as how application, then I talk to our fire chief or another expert that's what they do is fire protection, and find out that there are things that that I don't know until I talk to them. And so it's essential that we work hand in hand, in my opinion, as a city, to find out what is capable of being done and get it done effectively, permanently, as quickly as possible. It's far beyond time to that Band-Aid situations work. Our district has had these struggles from the inception, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with that history, and I'm not going to go into it. But the desperate need that our community is in for the proper amount of fire protection and fire resources, I really want the community to understand, and the fire district has done an outstanding job of getting this message out to more and more people. But it seems that the same groups of individuals are the ones that continue to be hoping and working and trying to find solutions to these problems, and that it's a problem that affects all of us. We all live here. We're all residents here. We are all in the same amount of risk and danger. This is something that's very personal to me. My own family, my daughter was in a terrible car accident on Balfour a few years ago. I was out of state and wasn't able to be there. And so anybody that's a family member, a parent, understands the frustration and the fear that goes along with that. And had our Engine 52 not been in quarters, and this happened just a short ways down at Fairview, there's every likelihood that my daughter could have permanently been disabled from it, or even died because of the situation. But I deal with, as a police chaplain, I deal with a lot of situations where they were not able to be there. Sometimes they were on other calls. Sometimes the resources have had to come out of area. And these aren't scare tactics for our community to hear. Just even a few years ago, when I was still on the fire board, there was a house fire in the city of Oakley, and the nearest resource came from Livermore, and they were the first on scene. So imagine the time that it takes a fire resource to come from Livermore all the way across Vasco, make it into Oakley, and be the first on scene. And so these aren't scare tactics when the fire district, when the fire chief, when the city is saying we've got to come up with a solution. These are very real solutions that affect every one of us. We were very fortunate just a few weeks ago when some fireworks set off a fire out off of Deer Valley, that it was a windy evening, but the resources that were able to be committed to that were able to take care of that without the loss of buildings, without the loss of life. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 acres that was on fire, but that could have very easily turned into something catastrophic to our residents, to our families. And so it's absolutely essential that the city, and that's what we're doing. We're looking as a working group, we're looking to find out what finances we have available to assist in this beyond what we're already doing, so that we can find a permanent solution. There have been a lot of solutions that have been offered that have several of them have had some great components to them, but at the same time, there have been some elements in there that make it a non-permanent or a non-sustainable process, and we've got to find a way to get around that, to fix that. And so, you know, there's none of us that aren't taking this with the seriousness that it deserves, because there isn't anything more important than our families. That's the whole reason that all of us are involved in this, is to make sure our families are in a place where they can be as safe as possible for as long as possible. And we've got to do something that is a permanent fix. And so I'm very happy to be working with our fire district, our fire board, to come up with a solution that's a permanent solution that's going to keep us as safe as possible. So thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Nice. Thank you, Vice Mayor Brian. Appreciate you sharing your personal stories. I know I was listening to the Pulse Point dispatch of that vegetation fire that you're talking about, and was impressed that, but very surprised they were able to keep it down to as few acres as they were. That initial engine company pulling up on scene reporting fire on both sides of the roadway, and with it being as windy as it was, hats off to them. We did have resources coming in from CAL FIRE and CON FIRE and utilizing outside entities, but they did a pretty incredible job. So I appreciate you being here this evening. I'm not sure if there's going to be any questions for you, but we appreciate if you could hang out until the tail end. But yeah, once again, just appreciate you working with us, sitting down with us, and being part of the solution. So thank you. Also going to, I noticed while Vice Mayor Bryant was speaking that we had a couple of other electeds on the line. Looks like Council Member Karen Rary is joining us this evening. Thank you, Karen, for joining us. And also one of my counterparts, Director Joe Young, who is the Finance Chair for East Contra Costa Fire, is with us. I know both of those individuals, if they could, they'd probably speak, but due to legal concerns, they're here as participants this evening. And we have Vice Mayor Bryant and Tim Ogden here to answer questions on behalf of the city. That being said, we've been trying to, this is the second time that we've done an event like this. We did an event last week in Oakley and brought in a community representative, and that was very well received. So this evening I've brought two community representatives to join us, and I'm going to go ahead and bring one of them in here shortly, and then I'm hanging on to one of them towards the tail end after question and answers. And just glance at my notes just to make sure that I'm not missing anything. I guess without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring David Cruz in this evening. And David is I would consider him a public safety expert. Dave and I actually years ago used to work for the same city together. And even though we didn't work directly together, we ran into each other here and there. I'm guessing probably a couple of years ago, and I let Dave speak to it, but probably a couple of years ago, David reached out to me, and I believe he reached out to what I consider my professional public safety social media page, and started asking questions about the fire district, asking what's going on, you know, why am I seeing, you know, certain things that I'm seeing. And I was actually surprised to hear that he was living out here in Brentwood, and he's been asking a lot of questions, making a lot of recommendations, very much following and supporting the district. And I just asked him if he would join us this evening. So I think I'm just going to bring you on, Dave, if you don't mind jumping on and just telling us why you're here this morning. Just keep going back to this morning. I need to start getting some sleep.
Oh.
Why you joined us here this evening, and just give us a couple of words, David. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the invitation, President Oftedal. And, you know, I just want to say what absolutely lovely words from Vice Mayor Bryant and talking about our families. And, you know, that's really why I'm here. Like you mentioned, myself, my wife, we moved out here 2 years ago to Brentwood because life is better in Brentwood, right? That's what we all believe, and that's our town motto. And I think we all embrace that and love that. And on that same note, yes, I had the incredible privilege of working with you in public safety, and now I'm on the private sector side. But I want to get back a little bit to where I came from. So I formerly served as your Deputy Regional Administrator for the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. And in that role, I was privileged to be able to work with many of the cities and towns and counties across this region, both preparing for, responding to, and helping recover from very large-scale disasters and small-scale disasters. And nothing touched me more in my entire career of 19 years than the wildfires of 2017. And I worked really, really closely with all 4 of those counties that were impacted here in Northern California, especially so with Sonoma County, which was, you know, particularly devastated. The area around Santa Rosa, I'm sure we've all heard about it. And I will just say this, in all of my time and experience in emergency services, you know, all of our best practices always go back to community preparedness, and community preparedness at that very, very small individual neighborhood level. And the fact that we're all here and we're all represented because we care about our families, we care about what happens here in Brentwood, means that everybody here is working toward this goal of making Brentwood better, because life can be better here. And yeah, we have this enormous challenge in front of us. The fire chief, yourselves as the board, all the electeds, I think everybody has been incredibly transparent with the community in explaining the situation. I don't think there's any doubt. We understand that there's a funding shortfall. And I wanted to express this to my neighbors, to all of you who are here, that we have this opportunity right now to fix something, and to fix something for the better. And this isn't about taxes or no taxes. This isn't the polarizing issue. At the end of the day, we have public safety professionals, we have first responders in our community who are really crying to us for help. They need help, and we have to come together and we have to give them that help. The story I'm going to say to you is a closed fire station. Yes, it is about response times. We hear about that. But at the end of the day, an open fire station represents to us a lot more than just response times. It provides a myriad of other support services in and around the community during disasters, before disasters, and just being that community support, having somebody there closer to us who's going to be able to be there for us when we need them most, when our families need them most. I don't want anybody to think like there's a tax or there's no tax. At the end of the day, we have a responsibility to stand up and say, we're going to get involved. We're going to help our neighbors understand this issue. And as somebody who's worked in risk and has worked in emergency management, I can tell you this, we are going to be facing, and many homeowners are already facing this challenge of fire insurance. And I would rather spend my money paying a couple extra dollars in fire protection to this district than to be paying it to an insurance company in higher premiums, or not even being able to get coverage. And that is certainly the case of what happened in Sonoma County, where people lost their homes and their insurance companies paid them out to rebuild their homes, and also gave them that warning and said, you're being paid for your home to be rebuilt, and this is what you insured, but we are not going to insure you ever again. And that can be the story we prevent here in Brentwood. Not because of a disaster, but because our risk rating here is going to become one that we are not going to be able to face with a tax. It's just not about that. This is about, we either pay now for better coverage, reduce our risk exposure, and be able to get fire insurance, or kind of not. I don't want us to feel like this is polarizing. I want everybody to understand, as your neighbor, as somebody who works in the private sector, I honestly want everybody here to listen to our first responders. This isn't a political issue. This is them seriously asking us for help, and we all need to come together to do that. We are that small community. I'm going to say one thing. I've never even met Vice Mayor Bryant, but you know, as small as our community is, I use your daughter to dog sit my dogs. She has a wonderful pet sitting business. And see, we never even knew that, right? But that's how tight Brentwood really is. And you know, we all got to look out for each other, and that's what we do, right? We love our neighbors and we love looking out for each other, and that's what makes us special. So let's do that here. Thank you again to the fire chief. Thank you again to our fire marshal. Thank you to all you board members. Thank you to Tim, our city manager, for doing all that you do. We're all going to get through this, but I'm just going to implore everybody, get involved, because we all need to be involved to solve this problem.
Nice. Thank you so much, David. Appreciate you being on here this evening with us and all of your support of the fire district. That definitely is a small town. I'm constantly finding out that I've had coworkers living in the town 8 to 10 years, and I had no idea. But I definitely appreciate you being here and your support, and I'll second that folks do need to get informed, stay involved, whatever that may be, and whether that's social media or local publications. Yeah, we need a lot more of that. It's clear from when I'm out talking with community members that, you know, either we could do a better job educating, or that folks may need to tune in a little bit and really see what's going on out here. I've got coworkers that think that there's a ton of fire engines out here, and that we have paramedics on the fire engines, and I consider us public safety experts or subject matter experts in there. These guys are doing such a good job out here with what they've got that folks just don't even realize what the true numbers are. So with that being said, definitely appreciate you being here this evening. I'm going to bring Chief Helmick on, and Chief, if you're ready for this evening, we'd love to have you jump in and share with us for a little bit, and then we'll jump into the question and answers.
Very good. Can you hear me?
I can.
All right. Well, thank you, President Oftedal, for the opportunity to be here tonight. One thing I want to start off with is I want to thank all of you, the citizens and business members, the elects, everyone that's here tonight. I was actually going through and kind of reading down the list of attendees that are here. And what I'll tell you is there's a lot of new faces that are here tonight, of which I really appreciate you being here and getting engaged. And I also want to thank all of you that are very familiar. Look, we have a very serious situation here within the fire district. And as President Oftedal stated, and other members have stated here tonight, is we have a huge challenge and we have a huge disconnect when it comes down to getting our message out. Tonight is purely educational, it's informative. And I will tell you, even those of you that are attending every one of our meetings, I can guarantee you, you're still continuing to learn. And the only reason I can say that with confidence is that I've worked in this agency as a volunteer firefighter in the late 90s, progressing through all the way throughout the ranks from 2002 to 2017, when I had the privilege to become the fire chief. And I will tell you, the more time I spend here, even as much as today, I continue to learn. And so those of you that are becoming actively engaged, and even though you're attending all maybe the Facebook Live meetings, all of these virtual town hall meetings, I can guarantee you our situation is very complex. It is very challenging, and to get a good understanding of where we are today, it is great that many of you are investing the time to continue to try to gain understanding, because we do have difficult decisions in front of us. How we arrived here is difficult. And this is purely educational and informative. So as I work through my very short presentation here tonight. I'm going to spend about 15 minutes doing a state of the district, as we have done within other organizations, and we're going to continue to do. And I'll talk about future Facebook Live meetings where we talk about very specific topics and do Q&A. And these virtual town hall meetings are intended to be more of a state of the district and also a Q&A, and we do have the representatives or elects from the certain areas that join us. But this is informative. This is intended to be a conversation. It is very hard to get the reach to the 128,000 residents that we have. So I just didn't want to dismiss the fact that I appreciate the fact that many of you are becoming familiar faces. I will tell you that the board has been challenged with having meetings and trying to cry out and get people engaged. Our board meetings and a lot of time our other meetings are dark. It's the same faces every time, but now I'm starting to see a lot more people coming on a regular basis, and I don't take that for granted. It's been 3 years of trying to educate and communicate, and people are actively listening. So I thank you for all your time. I know that you guys have families. I know you have businesses. I know that it's easy to be actively disengaged on what the fire district is doing, and the fact that you choose to be here just tonight or on a regular basis, I don't take that for granted. So what I'm going to do here is they gave me actually full access to run this thing, which is like giving me the mic, which is dangerous. So I'm going to have to get, I'm going to have to share my screen and my presentation. So bear with me here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to work through my presentation, and then we'll go into a Q&A after this. So tonight it is very much intended. I hope you guys, can I get a thumbs up if you guys can see my screen okay? Can anyone see my screen? Good, thumbs up all the way around. I love it. So tonight's objectives, and again, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because we'd rather spend a lot more time in the Q&A, but I think it's imperative for the ones that are new to the conversation. They get an idea of not only who we are, what our challenges are, what the past we're working to correct them, what our we've had some recent service level reductions that occurred back in July, and I'm going to be talking about that just in this last month or so about our service level reductions. And then I'm going to be providing you additional information when it comes down to locations for additional information. This is really intended to be a conversation starter, or it's continuing the conversations we're having to make sure people are educated and informed all things about fire, and then ultimately get into the Q&As. So East Contra Costa Fire, we cover Brentwood, Oakley, Knightson, Bethel Island, Byron, Discovery Bay, Marsh Creek, and Morgan Territory. It is 2 cities, Brentwood and Oakley, and all the other areas are the unincorporated areas of Contra Costa County. The footprint that we serve is about 250 square miles. There's currently 128,000 residents that swell to 155,000 residents, or workers, I should say, when there's full population. We currently are running this organization with 9 firefighters on a day with 3 fire stations. We really should have no less than 18 firefighters and 6 fire stations today to be able to provide adequate fire protection to our residents. We run approximately 7,700 calls that take approximately 9,500 pieces of equipment. That's 9,500 fire engines to be able to mitigate those 7,700 calls. These are the incidents that we had last year. We do anticipate that in 2020, the call volume is going to increase, and every year we assess this on an annual basis. In addition, we also have the 2020 census that will be coming out, and we believe that the number of the population will increase to some degree. But right now, the population we serve is 120,000, and we do serve 155 when all the business workers come out into our jurisdiction. Sorry, guys. The history of our organization is we're primarily volunteer organization from the 1920s all the way until 2002. In the 1970s, we went through what was called Proposition 13, and it locked in all of the rates of which they funded fire districts like ours back in the 70s. We were funded to adequately fund a volunteer fire organization. And in the we have not received any more funding outside of additional growth. We do have more funding than we did definitely in the 70s. Growth has come in dramatically, over 1,000% growth within our jurisdiction. But the reality is that growth has taken us from a volunteer organization to a career firefighter organization where we operate 24/7, 365. That comes with more cost, the pay and benefits to employees, to be able to maintain the stations, to be able to maintain the apparatus. The cost of goods have gone up. So our revenue has increased, but we're only sustainable at 3 stations as we continue to move forward. This, what you're looking at on the screen, what's very important is from 2024 to 2022, as I stated, we were multiple organizations that consolidated into one to who we are today in 2002. And we are the East Contra Costa Fire Protection District. As you can see on my screen where it says BOS, is that in 2002, we're actually dependent and governed by the Board of Supervisors, although the intent was always to be an independent fire district to stand on our own. Back in the late 90s and the early 2000s, there was a huge cry for local control, a career fire department. That's what the community and citizens wanted at that time. And that's when the transition occurred to turn us into a volunteer organization. We were a combination organization, which was volunteer and career at that time. But the intent was, when we were formed in 2002, was to get governance, to have local control, to have an elected board. And if you can notice, there's the other 2 areas down below, from 2002 to 2010, we were governing the Board of Supervisors, then we got an appointed board of 9 in 2010. Still not elected, but it was an appointed board of 9. That's the same board that actually hired me. Multiple people changed seats. That's who I got hired by. In 2010 to 2019, the 9 board members, of which 4 were appointed by the City of Brentwood, by the City Council of Brentwood, 3 by the City Council of Oakley, and 2 by Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors to the unincorporated areas. It was all decided by population. Brentwood has the largest population group. Brentwood has the 2nd largest, and the unincorporated areas fill in the rest. It wasn't until 2019, as you can see on the very bottom, that we had an elected board. A board that was not appointed. They didn't report to anyone else. They work for and answer to the citizens, and they're elected on a regular basis. They're elected. We have 3, this November, we have 2 seats that are becoming open. And in 2 more years, we'll have 3 seats. So either 3 seats come open or 2 seats, and they happen on a regular basis. So why is that even important? Why is this slide important? This slide really represents very clearly volunteer to career, the funding that we were funded at the time, and our governance. And right now we have a huge existing service level deficit, and it has to do with not having effective governance over time and not putting the appropriate mitigation measures on development over time. And I'll get into what we're doing, what our challenges are, but this, looking at our history, looking at our governance, is a huge, huge snapshot of the challenges that we have today. This screen represents, on the left-hand side, you'll see that we currently have 3 stations. We have 1 in Oakley, Station 53, that you'll see on the top of your screen, and that's near Cypress and O'Hara in Oakley. Station 52, which is on Balfour Road, near John Muir Parkway and Balfour. And then you have Station 59 at Point of Timber and Bixler in Discovery Bay. On the right-hand side of the screen, you still have our existing fire stations, but you'll see green circles and blue circles. The green circles show you that if we had adequate fire protection, where those stations would be. There'll be another station in Oakley. There'll be 2 more stations in Brentwood. And we know over the next 20 years with growth, if you look at the general plans of Oakley, Brentwood, and the county, that there'll be growth, that we know we'll need additional 3 stations. Another one in Oakley, another one Brentwood, and 1 in Discovery Bay. That's a 9-station build out. So we have 3 stations today. We have an existing 3-station deficit. And we know over the next 20 years, we're gonna need another 3 to address the growth that will come in. At full build out, the city of Oakley should have 3 fire stations. The city of Brentwood should have 4 fire stations. The unincorporated areas would have 2 fire stations. If general plans were to change, if urban limit lines were to change, this plan would have changed. But that's currently where we are currently and what we need as we move forward. This is really a key point as we get into our current challenges. Our current challenges where we are is that number 1 is that we're trying to provide adequate fire protection to our existing residents and our businesses. That's the number 1 challenge that we have. And number 2, it is making sure that we're prepared to provide adequate fire protection to the residents and businesses that will come into the future over the next 20 years. So we have an existing issue, which is a 3-station deficit, and we have a growth challenge, which is going to be a 3-station deficit. over the next 20 years. Again, today we have 9 firefighters on a day at 3 fire stations. We should have no less than 18 firefighters on at 6 stations, provide adequate fire protection. The funding that we have was established in the 70s to fund a volunteer organization at that time. And now we are providing 24/7 service levels. If we put the appropriate mitigation measures incrementally on every unit that was built from the 70s to date, we wouldn't be having service level deficits, and we wouldn't be having the challenges we do today, but we do. So what is the path? That's the problem statement before. Not adequate level of funding for additional 3 stations, and we have a growth challenge. That's the problem statement. But the question is, what does the fire district do? And what are we doing to increase service levels as we move forward? Right now, our 3-station model, one thing that we can say is that administratively, that we are sustainable to run our 3 stations, and we project that we can run our 3 stations for at least the next 10 years to be able to be sustainable at a 3-station model. That takes in all financial obligations, capital equipment replacement plans, pension obligations, pay and benefits. We're sustainable at 3 stations administratively, but we're getting overrun, and it is not sustainable operationally. We know this. But what we're doing right now, again, is we're maintaining being sustainable. We're living within our means. Secondarily is we're working on building our infrastructure to be able to address the growth. Right now, we have 1 station that is constructed in Oakley. We call it Station 55 at Bethel Island Road and Cypress Road. If revenues came into the district and we got personnel hired, it could be staffed in a month or 2. In 6 months, we can get people in. It's a matter of just getting people hired. The station is available to be able to get them in. We're also working with Brentwood right now to be able to build another station behind Pioneer School, which is at Grant and Empire in Brentwood. That is intended to be Station 51, and we have an administration building that's intended to be their Station 50. We're actually working towards design review right now. And we also have the opportunity to utilize existing stations if we had to dual staff if revenues came into the organization. But the bottom line is we are working to increase our infrastructure. So when revenues come in, we can staff the stations. I get criticized regularly. Why are you building the stations and you can't staff them? The reason I'm doing it is because there's an existing deficit. Our shuttered stations are not adequate. They are actually not in the right locations. And we are building stations so when we get revenue, we can staff them as soon as possible versus getting funding and not having a place to put personnel. So we're being proactive and we're building additional stations. We're also working on plans to increase service levels if revenues were to increase. We are prepared. We have a strategic plan, administratively, operationally. We are prepared if revenue is coming into the district. We have a plan to not only promote members throughout our organization, hire people in our organization, get them trained, to buy equipment, and get people staff to be able to move in. This is a revenue issue. We have a plan which is measurable, it's available to the community, and we know exactly what we do if we have revenues. We're living within our means, but we have a plan to be able to increase service levels. Where would the stations go? Which one would be first, second, third? How we buy apparatus, how we hire. We have a plan in place. It's just a revenue challenge. Lastly, is we are looking at all alternative options. We're also looking at what we'd have to do if we have to do taxes or assessments to be able to increase service levels. The fire board has talked very openly that they're looking at all options and exploring all options. As Vice Mayor Bryant said, and President Oftedal has stated previously, is that we are working with not only the communities, the agencies, we are also watching what's happening at the state level in regards to propositions. We're looking at the county level to anything that is going to be going on the ballots in November that may positively or negatively impact the fire district. We are exploring all options, everything from measures, initiatives, consolidation concepts, everything that's out there. There's not a rock that we will not overturn to look at a no tax solution to the challenges that we have. With that being said, staff is also preparing a 1-station, a 2-station, a 3-station, or 3-station tiered up models for potential assessments for the board to consider if we exhaust all options and there is no options. So we're living within our means, we're preparing for growth, we're exploring all options and alternatives, and we're also putting the mechanisms in place that if we have to, if we can resolve a 1-2 station deficit, we have a 1-station deficit, is there assessment for that? We're preparing all opportunities. and the board will reconsider all options as we approach the November timeframe. In regards to the growth, what are we doing? We know that we'll need another 3 stations, and one in Oakley, one in Brentwood, and the unincorporated areas to address growth over the next 20 years. We may need more if urban limit lines or anything changes, but today we know we need 9. We're implementing, and we're in the implementation phase right now, and I thank the city of Brentwood, I thank the city of Oakley, and I thank the county for being an agency partner on helping us stop the bleeding. We are right now implementing impact fees, which are one-time fees developers pay. And these fees will help build future stations, 3 stations, and fully equip them with all the apparatus to be prepared for firefighters to be able to staff them. So impact fees, developers pay, it's a one-time fee to build stations and get apparatus. And we're also working to implement what is called community facility districts, which the developers will be responsible for. And then once they sell the home, that assessment will be transferred to the property owner. And they will be assessed on an annual basis indefinitely to be able to pay for and mitigate the impacts from the growth that they bring into our community. The impact fees and the CFDs will incrementally bring revenue into the district to open Station 7, Station 8, and Station 9 over the next 20 years. If we had utilized that methodology 20, 30 years ago and placed that on development, we wouldn't be here today. We'd be fully funded. That opportunity was missed. We cannot place an assessment on anyone's properties without their approval. As I stated, the board is exploring all our options, but I want to commend not only the cities, the county, and the fire district for stopping the bleeding. We still got to get through the implementation process, but it's happening as we speak. We just got through the impact fees in Brentwood just last week. The impact fees passed unanimously. We're going to the city of Oakley in August to go through a workshop and then approval in September. And then we're working the calendar of the county for impact fees. And we're working on, the fire district is working on implementing the CFDs. So the growth challenge, we're well on our way, but the existing service level deficit is still a problem statement. So again, what we're doing is we're exploring all revenue options, and I want everyone in our communities to know. My office, my admin, Chief Albert, staff, we're working close with the labor groups and the fire board. We're not afraid of work. We have worked at the state level, the local level, the federal level. We're working with all the community agencies that surround us. We're exploring everything. And I hope that you see through our behaviors between now and November that we're continuing to go around those blocks. Even though they haven't been successful, we're going around again. And we're going to continue doing everything that we can as we move forward. I will tell you that although we seek help from the states, the counties, the cities, and the residents, it will take all of us to some degree. We need the cities and the county to support us in the implementation of these assessments and fees to address future growth. We need to be able to explore to see what we can do to address our existing deficit. And we also need to see what ultimately, when we exhaust all those means, if there's an opportunity for the residents to help us too. But again, it's for me to put the plays and the recommendations in front of the fire board and for them to choose what they bring in front of the people or not. And hopefully we come up with some alternatives that minimize the ask, if any, to our residents. Wrong. The service level changes that we had, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I think it's very important to note is that I want people to know, if they've been monitoring, we've had to reduce the way that we don't do public education events as of July 1 anymore, and we're also, our firefighters are taking what's called the defensive stance when it goes to residential fires. We are the only agency in Contra Costa County where our firefighters are going to incidents with only 3 fire engines, not 5. All agencies send 5 fire engines to incidents with 2 battalion chiefs. Our firefighters are going to incidents with only 3. That situation is very problematic. We are our own 911 system. When our firefighters get compromised, we rely on ourselves to rescue those that are trapped, missing, and or out of air or compromised. And we're working in very dynamic environments. And so the fact that I'm only sending 3 fire engines to incidents, historically, we would call more resources from adjoining agencies. If we had smoke or flames showing from a building, we would just call them automatically, and if they were able to send them to us, they would. But right now, our automatic aid agreements and our agreements with outside agencies are becoming so strained because those aid agreements are supposed to be balanced on an annual basis so communities don't subsidize each other. And even going to 3 engine companies, our aid agreements are 3 to 1, which means every time we send them 1 resource, they send us 3. And it's not sustainable. So I had to make the hard decision, and it took me a year to come to the decision, and the driving force was, number 1, firefighter safety, and number 2, to maintain those automatic agreements. When we call for help, they automatically come, to make sure they're sustainable, to only call resources when it's absolutely critical. And so I want to make something very clear, is our members are trained and they're wired and they're molded to go and get fires. And we will risk a lot to save a lot. And this directive is the hardest directive I've had to make as a fire chief. And I'm saddened and disappointed and mildly embarrassed. I had to make the directive, but here's the deal. I want you to know, when our 3 fire engines arrive at scene, they are going to investigate and do everything they can to minimize and identify if there's any life threat. And they're going to be in a go situation until they can minimize and identify there's no life safety threat. If they confirm there is a residence and there's a life safety threat, they will call additional resources and they will come automatically beyond the 3 resources. Secondarily is if they minimize and identify there's no life safety, but the fire can't be contained with the original structure that it's in, they'll call for additional resources. But also understand this. If our 3 engines arrive at scene and they identify there's no life to safety risk and there is not a risk of it getting outside the initial home or container involved, the directive is not to call for any more aid and mitigate it safely with the three resources you have. Secondarily is, our members will they never stand idle. They're going to do what they can with what they have, but fighting a fire with 3 engines is very difficult to do. And they have to work slowly from the exterior, methodically to the interior, and it does unfortunately cause more property damage because they have to be very calculated to do it, but it's got to be safe. So we will call a lot, we will risk a lot and do a lot for life safety, not keeping it in the box. But due to the lack of resources, our aid agreements are being strained, the safety of our members, the time and distance is a reality. Driving from Oakley to Discovery Bay with 3 engines, and if you get compromised, calling from help, and help's coming from Concord, Bay Point, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they're 30, 40 an hour away. So we have to operate safe. This is a resource issue. It's a sad one, but it's our current reality. Please visit our website, go to our website. There's a ton of information on there. Myself and Chief Albert for anything community risk reduction, fire investigation, fire prevention, hazard abatement. Chief Albert is there for you to serve you. If you live in our jurisdiction, I want you to know I am your fire chief. I expect to, I answer not only to the fire board, but I want to make myself available to all of the citizens in our jurisdiction. We have multiple of these town hall events going on through the communities. The content's can be the same, but there are specific concerns in different communities that we work to address. And we're doing FaceTime Live, where we have a series of 6 videos. And these 6 videos are going to be very specific topics, from pay and benefits, to response times, to how are we living within our means, to what are the things that we've explored and what are sustainable solutions to our problem, and many more. All of these events are being archived. We're working diligently right now to build a splash page. We did 2 events last week, 1 on Monday. We're doing this one here tonight. We're hoping by end of this week, no later than early next week, that this splash page on our website will have everything being recorded and be available to you. I wish I had more time. We do want to spend time on your questions. I'm going to have this slide up here for a minute, but that's my cell phone number there, and Chief Albert's cell phone number there, and that is also my my email. I am here to serve you, and I want to be with you guys. So I am going to hit pause, and I'm going to pass it back over to President Oftedal. If I can stop sharing my screen. I appreciate your time tonight, President Oftedal. That concludes my report.
Nice, thank you so much, Chief. I appreciate it. And I know we've ate through a lot of the time, so I'm going to get right into the question and answer time frame. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Susanna, and maybe right before that, I'm just going to mention again, if you would like to start typing stuff in, I believe there's already stuff in the inbox, but if you do have questions for us, and if you'd like them directed specifically to an individual, please add that to your question as well. But Susanna, you able to hand off our first question?
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, just a reminder, if you're on your phone, you can raise your hand by hitting *9, and you can unmute yourself and remute yourself with *6. Feel free to pop your questions in chat, and I'll read them if you don't want to raise your hand and speak live. And I do have a couple questions in chat already. From Elsa Kleeman, she has 2 questions. The first one's directed to the fire department. What is the breakdown of the CFDs to each agency, and what % does the fire department receive?
All right, I'll hit mute real
whoever
quick.
can-
So let me be clear about a couple different things. So CFDs. So CFDs mean Community Facility District. Every land use authority has the ability to establish what's called CFDs, Community Facility Districts. And when they're built, they're very specific to the either very broad spectrum or very specific areas of which they can be used. The city of Brentwood, the city of Oakley, Contra Costa County, they have CFDs, none of which impact the fire district. The fire district is in the process of developing our own district-wide CFD. We do participate in 3 CFDs currently, and they're all within the city of Oakley. We are the host of one, the city of Oakley is a host of another, and then we work with the Diablo Water District on a third. I do want to note that if we were, and if any measure were to pass, we would not have inequities where people would get double taxed. We always take that into consideration. But to be very clear, the fire district is working to implement its first CFD. But the cities have them, and the fire district currently does not receive any CFDs from any of the cities or the county.
Thank you, Chief, and hopefully that answered the question. If it didn't, feel free to type in a follow-up question, and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, Elsa had a little bit of a follow-up. She said she was told that there were CFDs specifically for fire.
Could she specify, is she speaking for the fire district or one of the land use agencies?
Just says for fire. Hey, Elsa, could you clarify that for us, please? And then we're going to go on to the next question, and
we'll come back to it. And please continue asking questions like this, and we'll work through the answers. We want to answer all your questions.
Absolutely. From Indrani Golden, what can we do to spread awareness? This can go to anyone. So anybody who wants to answer it, feel free to jump in.
What I'd like to do is bring to the conversation Fire Marshal Steve Albert. He is the agency's Public Information Officer, PIO. So Chief Albert, do you have any recommendations to our citizens or businesses to get the word out?
Sure, thank you, Chief. I mean, the biggest thing is, you know, we serve 128,000 residents of our district, and the biggest challenge is being able to educate and inform all those residents of what's going on within the district. We ask, and we continually ask, all willing participants to actually share the message, have them get informed, have them go to our website, have them participate in these events, so they can actually share what's really going on within the community. For example, the last time that the district did go out and actually ask for some type of funding measure, there was 10,000 out of approximately probably 120,000 at that point in time who actually responded back to that vote. So we know for a fact that we need to really get out that message and be able to share what's really going on and what level of protection that the community has.
Thank you, Steve. Our next question comes from Karen Rary. Karen, can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Isn't it true, though, that we're currently working with the fire district, the city of Brentwood is, that you guys now have a seat at the table when developers come in to be able to impose fire-specific CFDs onto those homes?
Yes. So right now, like I stated in my presentation, and again, I apologize, it was too much too fast. But the answer to the question is absolutely. So the district is working to address all future growth, and we are working on the first developer that's coming through the process right now. We're having discussions to be able to establish the community facility district, the CFD, with them, and all future development that's going to be coming through will be annexed or brought into that CFD throughout the whole jurisdiction, not just in Brentwood, but throughout the whole jurisdiction. And so the fire district, to address the growth challenge, we are putting in the impact fees to build the stations, buy the apparatus, and we're on the implementation phase of establishing district-wide CFDs. And we're doing that in partnership and cooperation with the city of Brentwood, the city of Oakley, and Contra Costa County. It's a very uniform approach throughout our jurisdiction. So the fire district is developing its own district-wide CFD. And to be clear, again, in Oakley, we established a CFD some time ago in the Summer Lake communities. And there's the Gilbert properties that are just being finalized in construction right now. And we have a CFD with them. And in Delta Coves, we have another CFD. But those are the only 3 CFDs we're currently collecting revenue on, and we are working to establish it district-wide as we move forward.
Okay, but we have imposed a fire-specific CFD on the Amber Lane apartments in addition to what you're talking about. Will those then be pulled into the district-wide CFD?
So we are working with Amber Lane and many other developers that are bringing on new development, and there will be a very specific East Contra Costa Fire CFD placed on that development and future development that will go specifically to the fire district. It won't go to any other entity, solely to us, to be able to mitigate the impacts of their growth.
And I believe that was what Ms. Kleeman was asking earlier regarding, she had heard that there had been already fire-specific CFDs that are out there.
Yes, if that, again, that's where I just need to be clear. Are they speaking, is it city, county, or fire district? The answer is yes. On that development very specifically, we are working with them, and they have already agreed to participate in a district-wide CFD.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chief. Next up is Benjamin Kellogg. Benjamin, unmute. Yep, there you go.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. This is for Councilperson Bryant, as you were the president of the fire board previously, as well as councilperson currently. Why is it still the position of the city of Brentwood that they have no responsibility to help fund the fire district when it clearly states in the community facility district language that CFD taxpayer funds are authorized to pay for fire suppression, emergency medical and public safety services, firefighting, emergency medical and public safety personnel salaries, benefits, and other associated costs, which may include uniforms, safety equipment, etc., which is needed for the daily activities and normal employment of these types of personnel. It looked pretty clear that the city leaders at that time wanted to fund fire protection on a more long-term, sustainable basis. If Brentwood had all along paid their fair share, whether or not through updating impact fees in a timely manner or distributing CFD fees to the fire district, we would not be in this drastic situation, as Brentwood is a large part of the district. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Kellogg. It is not now, nor has it ever been, the stance of the city of Brentwood that it doesn't have any responsibility. As a matter of fact, the city of Brentwood financially supports the fire district as the biggest investor and supporter of this district. And so, because there have been extreme growth problems, the Prop 13 issue, all of these issues that I'm sure that you're extremely well versed in, because we are a part of a district, we do supply those resources to the district, and that's how a district works. The city of Brentwood does not have its own fire department. Should it have its own fire department, we would at that time be responsible for all apparatus of every individual in every building. If you know the amounts of that it costs to run a specific engine company, the astronomical amount of funds it takes to start it, the requirement to make the current district whole should the city of Brentwood pull out of this district, we would have to make sure that they were able to operate without any negative impact of the city of Brentwood pulling out. So those funds just aren't in existence. And so we are in the process of doing what we can to help mitigate some of the growth issues, some of the financial issues, and we're doing it very seriously. But financially, right now, the issue that we have that has devastated the city of Brentwood financially with COVID, we're somewhere in the neighborhood of $4.5 million in the hole just to get back up to zero. Had COVID not happened, there potentially could be even more that we could do, but there, under no circumstances can Brentwood fund all of the deficit. There just isn't that money there. And even if we were to make draconian cuts in employees, the funds just aren't there. There's been substantial growth in the population and the use of the resources from the city that we have, and we have still not replaced some of the essential people that make those things happen. And so we're running at a manpower deficit in addition to a financial deficit. So there is no passing the buck. The process of East Contra Costa Fire becoming a district was very convoluted and had very many different iterations before we have what we have now. And certainly these decisions have been made since 1978, I believe. And had we known then what we know now, I'm certain some of those decisions from the cities would have been different and have been put in place earlier. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks. Thank you, Joel. That was great. I've got a couple questions in chat still, but Ryan Raimondi's hand has been up for a very long time. And I also want to make a note, don't leave right after Q&A because we have a very special presentation that you do not want to miss. So stick around. Ryan, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
And yep, we can.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate the board putting this on tonight. I think it's great to get connected with the community. And I just want to briefly talk about numbers in specific. So the impact fees, the developer fees, as noted in the city council meeting, last week or early this week, the fees that were put on recently were essentially put on because they hadn't put on for the past 20 years. And so this is the rate that it should have been at the whole time, which is great. But the issue is development has started to slow. And while we'll still see some more development and some more revenues, I just want to understand exactly if the ECCFPD has done any analysis about the projected revenues, how much these impact fees could really provide the district in the long term, because we simply don't, it doesn't seem like this might be a long-term solution as things start to slow down quite a bit. And we really aren't having that population boost and that housing boost that we had in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I'd be happy to address that. So thank you for the question, Ryan. So not to go into it tonight, but all of the studies that we have, there's a very inclusive process of the cities, the county, and the fire district, obviously. We have an engineer's report that identify very clearly what not only the revenues are going to be coming in from impact fees, but we'll also have the same type of studies that are coming in from CFDs. I think the important thing to note is that we do anticipate that we'll need 3 stations over 20 years, but if the growth rate is to slow down, and we only need 1 station due to population, the revenues will be coming in incrementally over time. They don't come in blocks, they come in by unit. They're restricted funds. They're utilized very specifically for certain things. So the rate of which that we are applying to each unit will incrementally be able to, at a point that is needed, to add an additional station into our system.
Okay.
So again, the numbers are in all the reports. And I'd be more than happy to work with you online and provide you all the engineers' reports. I'll give you projected numbers over the next 20 years. But we have many people that are a lot smarter than me that look into not only what we need to put on each unit, and we work with the cities and counties to identify the numbers of projected growth that they anticipate. And it is not just a guess. It is, we have to have what's called a nexus. It has to be very measurable. And those studies are open to the public.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. The follow-up question then would be, so what's good about, in terms of growth, we'll have a proportional to the impact fees, but then that remaining deficit that we have now would still sustain.
Absolutely. And I think it's also good to know, and I think that's a fair point to be made. you know, we're guided by laws and statutes, and there is the fire mitigation fee, and there's laws of ways of which that you can only get things approved and ways of which monies can be used, restricted or non-restricted funds. The impact fees and the CFDs on future growth very much so need to be focused to those, because the reason being is we work with the developers that are the owners of the homes, and they assume that liability and they transfer it over to the new property owners. And the fire mitigation fee can only fund impacts from growth by law. They cannot be used for existing service level deficits. With that being said, however, is if the district wanted to place a district-wide CFD on existing residents, it's an assessment. It's a tax. And the only way we can place it on their properties, as we do with future developers, is by them agreeing to do it. So we could apply and do the same methodology on the existing residents, but we know, and we have heard, the challenges when it comes down to assessments. So the growth challenge is one challenge when those tools of CFDs and impact fees we're putting in place to address it. But we're also exploring all alternatives and potential assessments for the existing residents, but it would take for them to approve, because we can't place assessments on properties without the support and approval of residents. So we can't, the growth challenge tools are not used to address existing service level deficits.
Okay. All right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Our next question is from Kathy Griffin, and this is probably directed to Joel and or Tim. It's kind of a city related question. She's asking, why can't all the cities in the fire district budget part of their city budget to fund fire and emergency services? Isn't it time for cities to contribute to get our service levels up to acceptable levels? And then she had a follow-up question about why are we allowing, continuing to allow more building without the ability to have adequate fire protection? So
Well,
Joel, Tim?
I'll be happy to give a stab at it. I'll answer the second one first about the building. And I know that Ms. Griffith is extremely familiar with our circumstance, so I don't have to go into a whole lot of the history of it. But one of the things that we have to understand is without building, the revenue does not come into the fire district or the city. That's where the money comes from. That's through Prop 13. That's through all of the other pass-throughs. Without building, and here the catch-22 is, once you run out of building, how do you sustain the necessary financial needs when building stops? And so one of the issues that we're going to have to take and find a solution to, and honestly, there's no mystery to what this solution is. The chief was just talking about applying an overall requirement for funding. That's called a tax. The problem is, and there was a presentation that the first time I heard it, as far as taxes are concerned, about additional revenue with no taxes, my ears perked up immediately, because I feel like we are, as California residents, so hyper taxed on everything that there's just almost no more room to be taxed, especially with this situation with the economic processes that COVID has brought down. This is going to have an economic catastrophic effect for the next 2 to 5 years without question. And so having these funds, if you don't allow the building, you don't have the money to provide the services. If you have the building with a structure that it has insufficient resources already, there's the additional burden on that. So there's no question that's a situation that is a two-edged sword. You have to have one to have the other, and without one, you don't get the other. And so why weren't they put in place earlier? I don't have an answer to that. I've been working with the fire board for almost 10 years now, and going back through every decision that was made through all of the different components that now makes up ECCFPD, East Contra Costa Fire Protection District. the decisions, yes, there were decisions that were made that were delayed. There were decisions that were made that should have been done more quickly. Even in 1978, the Prop 13 does not have any mechanism for adjustment of growth. That's a problem that the authors who put that, if you do the study of the history of Prop 13, it was put together very quickly. There are many, many unintended consequences that are causing suffering for every special district, not just fires and fire. So all of these issues we've got to address, and this, yes, the city is working to do that, but we also have to understand, as far as reality, you've got public safety you've got police, you've got fire, you've got the necessity of taking care of the community in all of these different areas, and a limited budget. And so you have to make these decisions based upon what's going to do the best for the community as long as you can do it. And so we've got to just make these decisions. And the reality is there is no free money. Everyone knows that. And so if you're going to take money from something that was planned in the city's budget over a 10-year forecast from one pot, somewhere that deficit is going to have to be made up. And now we've got an additional $4.5 million deficit. So that's why we're making these decisions. Now, we can't do anything about the past. We have to focus on what we can do, what is legal to do, what's possible to do, and what we're willing to invest in our community safety-wise.
Thank you, Joel. Got another question from Brian Scott. This is for whoever can answer this or cares to answer it. Can anyone estimate the dollar value of the CFDs that have been discussed?
In regards to, I need help with that. Again, I'd ask him to do a couple of things. If he can, are they the fire, the city, and what we're anticipating to do, or what we're currently doing?
Hey, Brian, do you want to unmute yourself and clarify a little bit?
There you go, Brian. You're unmuted now.
Okay. Yeah, the question has to do with all of the CFDs. At one point during the strategic planning session in December, I think it was a couple of years ago, the CFDs in aggregate were discussed, and the then city manager was asked how much we were talking about on an annualized basis, whether these CFDs would contribute significant amount of money or just enough to maybe over a lengthy period of time build a fire station. And the answer was they would have no impact on staffing, which appears to be the biggest issue the fire district faces. I mean, it seems like we've got fire stations, but we don't have sufficient operational funding to staff those stations. So I guess I'm asking, has anyone kind of figured out on an annualized basis how much these might contribute to staffing a new fire station?
Okay, I'm going to hit that from the fire department perspective, Mr. Scott, and if it doesn't, then we can go from there. So what I would do again is, if you would like, we do, and we are working on finalizing the engineer's report and the fee schedule that would be applied to all future growth for fire district CFDs. The fire district does have all the policies in place. We are working with the developer themselves. What I will tell you is that the dollar amounts, and I'm not going to quote specific dollar amounts because I don't have on top of my head, and I'd rather be accurate than wrong, is that we are incrementally, and the dollar amount of which we are going to be assigning to the units will be adequate over a certain amount of time to be able to staff the stations operationally for Station 7, Station 8, and Station 9. So the dollar amounts vary specifically per unit. I'd be more than happy to share it with you. We continue to discuss these at our finance meetings, which are open to the public. And ultimately, when the board approves the final report, that is obviously open to the public also. But let me go back to the root concern. I can't speak to anyone else that has spoken on behalf of this issue, but I'll tell you from the Fire Protection District is the CFDs that will be applied, the community facility districts will be applied to future growth, will sustainably staff and sustainably Station 7, 8, and 9. So hope that answers your question.
Okay. What about stations 4, 5, and 6?
Again, Station 4, 5, and 6, that's an existing service level deficit. And we are currently not utilizing a CFD and/or the board has not made a decision to move forward on any assessment for any existing service level deficits. When it comes to an existing service level deficit, the district they have only a certain amount of legal means. 97% of our funding comes through property taxes and assessments. So right now it's all property taxes. We do get one assessment called Measure H, which is a county measure that comes to us. So we do get funds from that, but everything else comes from property taxes. The fire board can do what's called a parcel tax or a benefit assessment. An added benefit assessment is the district would add a benefit, and that benefit would be distributed amongst the agency, and then people would be contributing back to the organization in that manner. We are building engineer reports for potential assessments that the board may consider in November. While we're looking and exploring all alternatives in lieu of a revenue measure, staff is working to develop a 1-station, a 2-station, a 3-station, and a 3-station tiered up approach to addressing any service level deficits we may have after we go through all of our exploratory options. So it is not the existing service level deficits are going to be handled through parcel tax and/or a benefit assessment. The district is working right now on preparing the engineering reports for those, and that's what the board would consider. But we, again, are looking at all alternative ways in lieu of taxes. And if we can address a 1-station deficit, a 2-station deficit, and we're left with only 1 station left, that may be something the board entertains. If we find an alternative solution that requires a no tax solution, there'd be no ask. But we're doing our due diligence, working with everybody at all levels and all areas to make sure, and that's why it's important for all of you to be educated and informed of what decision we make. But I do want to be clear, the mechanism the district will use in the future is not going to be a CFD. It will be a benefit assessment and/or parcel tax. And right now we're preparing engineers reports for benefit assessments.
Thank you, Chief. I've got time for one more question, and I'm going to David Cruz because he has not had an opportunity to ask a question yet. Stick around for our final speaker and join us at one of our next meetings. Keep your question in mind, bring it along with you, and we're just running out a little time tonight. So David, take it away.
So less of a question and really more of a statement. We all understand there is a funding shortfall. And I think, with all the questions that have come up, which are wonderful, everybody should just take away from this that there is a shortfall, and we have 2 ways to go to get in and out of this. We can either pay to reduce our risk by paying for this benefit district, or we're going to end up paying more for fire insurance or losing fire insurance. That is the end result here. We should all be very clear about that. This is not about taxes. It's not about robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's not about taking money from our police officers and giving it to our fire district. We all have this choice to deal with. We have to deal with this problem. And there's just one way out of it, unfortunately. Well, 2 ways. And I would rather, I think, and I know I speak for my neighbors that are around me, we would rather have better fire protection, more fire stations, and not pay it to State Farm or whoever our private insurers are. So I hope everybody walks away with that, because that is the absolute truth of what's in front of us today.
Thank you, David. Good words. And Bryant Oftedal, I will send this back to you.
Nice. Thank you, David. Thank you for everyone that brought up questions. I wish we had enough time to stay on here for another hour, because I know there's a lot of questions that are out there. And as stated, please send them in, bring them to the next meeting. We are hosting a lot of these. I know I probably have some housekeeping work to do just so we can minimize a little bit of our talking points and allow the public to get in there. Our last meeting, we had actually got close to the end and we had ran out of questions. So I know we built a little bit more talking points on this one, but I hate leaving with questions that are still out there. That being said, with respect for everyone's time this evening, everybody was planning on being here until roughly 8:30. Want to get to our final speaker this evening. And it's somebody that I had asked to come this evening. She had also reached out to me, a Brentwood resident, Kathy Daniel, who is a local realtor, but recently she reached out to me on one of my social media sites and asked for me to give her a call, and basically suggesting the time was of the essence. And it was actually during an active fire, and I don't know if it was one of our recent ones in Knightson or if it was over in Bethel Island, but it was as I was standing outside giving her a call and talking to her, I could see smoke off into the distance, and spoke to her for quite some time and have been speaking to her quite a bit. And during that time, she shared some stories with me that I just thought were, very, very personal stories that, where she's been impacted in our district and has had to utilize the system. And I asked her if she would come and join us this evening and share those with us. So I know that she's coming and she's going to share at least one or two of those with us. And I believe she's brought some photos along with her. But without further ado, Kathy, if you wouldn't mind jumping on the line and sharing with us.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me. So I've been a Brentwood resident. We purchased our home in November of 1997 and have gone nowhere since then. I absolutely love it. They say home is where the heart is, and this is where my heart is. This is my home. I always will be from now on. I'm very happy to be a resident here. I think we are definitely the smallest big town that you'll ever see. That being said, it seems we're all very much tied together. The night of November 28th, 2017, I was coming home from Clayton after spending a girl afternoon with my granddaughter in Clayton. We were driving through Marsh Creek, coming up to the light at Walnut, and I noticed some commotion in my rearview mirror, and just instinctively turned off to the right so I could go to the shoulder just in case somebody wasn't stopping in time. It just seemed like cars were coming in really hard and fast behind me. And the next thing I know, I was hit, and I luckily was off to the side of the shoulder. My granddaughter was asleep. She woke up screaming, and I jumped out of my car and I ran to the cars behind me. The lady that was pushed into me, let me be clear, it was 4 vehicles that were involved. This is the truck right here that started the chain reaction. That was a Cadillac Escalade truck. I jumped out of my car. The woman that was pushed into me was trying to take her seatbelt off. She wanted to get out, and at that time, you really don't know what's going on. I kept telling her, leave your seatbelt on, we might get hit again. I don't know what I was thinking. And then there was another car that was pushed into her by the Escalade. That's the car that was hit by the Escalade up front. They had been Christmas shopping in Concord and were on their way home, from what I understand. I also understand that the woman that was pushed into me had passed after the accident a few days later. I'm not sure if that's true or not. But what I'm trying to say is that it took all of the engines that we had to come to this accident. Every single firefighter that we had came to this accident. There were 3 helicopters that were called in to come to this accident. And during that time, I had heard in my head, I had heard radios somewhere, Marsh Creek, IC, we can't cover that right now, call up Concord or something like that. I had heard that. And just a few days prior to that, or maybe a week prior to that, I had read something where one of our chiefs had said that our average response time at that time was 8 minutes and 17 seconds. And they were trying to get, and then I hadn't told anybody that my granddaughter was in the car yet. And then I saw Robert Ruddick. He came over and gave me a big hug to make sure I was okay. And then eventually I said, you know, Annabelle's in the car. And they're like, oh my God, we have 6 patients. And so they went running over there to go see Annabelle, and somebody, I don't know who, stayed with her and held her hand while she cried, shaking uncontrollably. She was pretty upset. My husband by this time, and my son, and my 9-year-old granddaughter came up, and my 9-year-old was freaked out, and the firefighters stopped her, and somebody held on to her. I'm not sure who that was, but they kept trying to get Annabelle and I to go to the hospital, and I kept saying, no, no, no. I knew there weren't enough ambulances. I don't know if I heard they needed another ambulance or another bus or whatever. Where I'm from, they call those boxy ambulances buses. So I refused treatment, and they made me sign the AMA, and I went home. Later on that night, started coughing, wound up going to the hospital. I had bruised lungs, bruised liver, bruised heart. I was not in good shape. Luckily, my granddaughter was okay. I also suffered some neck injuries and broke some teeth. So to this day, I still have ringing in my ears, and I have head pain, and I don't know if that's from the broken teeth or whatever. I've not been able to have that repaired yet. Anyway, a few days later, I was talking to my friend Jen, and she mentioned to me that her dad had not been feeling well a few nights before, and they called 911, but 911 was not available. They wound up taking him to the hospital themselves, and he was in the midst of a cardiac incident. And 911 was not available because they were at my accident. So this is a really small town for as many people as we have. And it just really drove home to me how much we need help here. I'm dumbfounded that we could be such a large area with so little coverage, especially coming from LA County, where every time you turned around, there was another fire department there. I don't think people understand what's going on. I really don't. You know, as a realtor, I'm finding that people can't buy houses because in some areas, they can't get fire insurance. So if you're not paying cash, you're not buying a house. This is serious. We need help here. We need help here. It's not, I don't know what else to say. I want to drive that home, that this is a serious incident. And if I can help make that happen, get our funding, it's important. We need to do this.
Nice, thank you, Kathy. Appreciate you sharing that very personal story and sharing those photos with us, which are pretty dramatic. I think obviously anybody of us looking at that, yeah, just hard to look at that, but really appreciate you being here this evening. Glad that you're doing okay, and I appreciate you just sharing those comments, because we do need everybody to get involved and help us share our story. This is a huge district. I think we're saying it's somewhere around 120,000 residents right now. We are challenged to share the story. And that's one of the asks that I'll have this evening, is just the folks, if you'll share the videos that are out right now talking about response times and the underfunding challenges and these Facebook Live events that we're having on Mondays. But thank you for being here this evening. I'd like to also thank Dave Cruz for being a special guest and speaking with us this evening. I'd like to thank the elects that are here, especially Vice Mayor Joel Bryant for being one of the presenters this evening and speaking, as well as Councilmember Karen Rary that's on the call, and Joe Young, who's with the fire district. Apologize if I missed anybody on the elect side. I did scroll through the gallery a little bit just to see if I saw any faces. I did see that there's some up and coming runners for council and other positions. So I appreciate you jumping on and really paying attention to what's going on here with the fire district, and would invite you to join us on these Facebook Lives that are coming up. I've got a couple of dates, if you could just save the date, August 10th, 18th, and 25th, and then September 14th at 6 p.m. are these Facebook Live events. Also, the other town halls that we're going to be having, Bethel Island will be coming up on August 13th, Discovery Bay on August 24th, Marsh Creek and Morgan Territory on September 10th. And Byron and Knightson is going to be held jointly on September 14th. If you do have any community events, obviously with this physical distancing, shelter in place, I guess the COVID pandemic overall, if you do have a virtual event that you would like to invite us to, I know that myself, Chief Helmick, Fire Marshal Bear, we're all more than willing to come and join you if we can and answer questions at your events. I would also like to just ask folks, if you're not already following the fire district social media, please follow us. The social media team has almost every social media platform there is. Please follow and like on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're also on Nextdoor and YouTube. I know there's probably a couple that I'm missing, but the big one that I push is Pulse Point. And if you don't have Pulse Point, that's an app where you can see where the fire engines are going. If you hear those sirens that are around you and you're wondering where they're going, Pulse Point will show you where your East Contra Costa firefighters are going. The biggest part of that I want to push is with the limited resources in our area, we really rely on Pulse Point because what that system was designed for was a notification system that folks that are trained in CPR and first aid, more so CPR, if you're within a small radius of, let's say you're at a Safeway or in a parking lot and somebody's collapsed and called 911, this Pulse Point app will alert you if you have clicked the button that you're trained in CPR that somebody's down, somebody's reported cardiac arrest or airway obstruction. So it's extremely important, as you've heard with these huge delays that we've got in our district. Somebody collapses, goes into cardiac arrest, 4 to 6 minutes is brain damage. That's when brain damage is kicking in. And after that 6-minute time frame, you've got irreversible brain damage. And we really need our community. We need our citizens right now. We need people to get engaged, involved, respond. And this Pulse Point app, I'd really ask if there's anybody on this evening's event, if you would please download it and click the button that you are trained in CPR and that you are willing to be notified. And if you know folks that have been trained in CPR in this district, neighbors, EMTs, paramedics, nurses, doctors, you can encourage them to download this app for us. We really need the community's help all across the board. And with that, I thank everybody again for joining us. And my call to action this evening is please help us get people engaged. Please follow us on social media. Once this evening's event gets posted, please share this with friends, families, neighbors, folks that live in Contra Costa County in general. I appreciate you being here, and I hope you'll join us at next week's event in Bethel Island and for the weekly Facebook Live events. Thank you so much.